The ongoing trade war between the United States and China are fueling fresh concerns here in Seoul, with the latest bout of tensions causing a sizable impact on Korean firms and potentially their multi-billion-dollar investments into the U.S. economy. For more, stay tuned to Press Perspective today. Welcome to Press Perspective. It's Wednesday, October 15th here in Seoul. I'm Oh Soo-young filling in for Min Sunhee. The United States and China are locked in a cycle of escalation, retaliation and negotiation in their ongoing trade war, with Korean firms caught in the crossfire, especially following the fresh bout of tensions that began last week as U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to impose additional tariffs of 100% on China starting next month. For more on how the uncertainty is affecting the Korean economy and potentially its investments in the United States, we're joined by Lee Ji-hoon with the international news agency Reuters, and also Professor Jinill, Professor of Economy at Korea University, who was, of course, a senior advisor to the U.S. Fed before his time at Korea University. It's lovely to see you again, Professor.
Thanks for having me.
Well, my first question goes to you. So we saw the U.S., renewing its threats towards China, saying that they're going to impose 100% sanctions. And it's funny because it seemed that the US and China were edging towards something of a compromise in their negotiations. And of course, this comes ahead of a potential meetup between Presidents Trump and Xi Jinping at APEC in South Korea this month. So first, I'd like to know how you're reading the situation, what kind of developments we've seen so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, China and the United States have been in a trade truce for some months, but then, after a trade war earlier this year of imposing more than 100% tariffs against each other. But then things changed last week after China expanded its restrictions on exports of rare earths, and which are key minerals or key minerals for major technology products. In response to China's announcement, U.S. President Donald Trump said he no longer sees a need to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping at the APEC summit in South Korea later this month. He also announced additional 100% tariffs on China, reviving a trade war and rattling financial markets last week. But then again, over the weekend, Trump eased his tone a little against China, saying everything will be fine. And U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he said this week, Trump will still meet Chinese President Xi at the APEC summit in South Korea. That provided some relief to financial markets, but there still are concerns lingering over if the two countries will be able to reach an agreement by the APEC summit amid tough rhetoric against each other. And South Korea is also being affected by the heightened tensions between the two countries. Most recently, China announced yesterday sanctions against U.S. units of South Korean shipbuilder Hana Ocean. And China banned transactions and cooperation with 5 U.S. units of Hana Ocean, and saying Hana Ocean is cooperating with the U.S. for its investigations. And that raised concern because Hana Ocean has a shipyard in the United States, and it is playing a major part in South Korea's shipbuilding cooperation project with the United States, which is also known as the MASCA project. South Korea's presidential office said yesterday there will not be immediate impact from the sanctions, but it is still necessary to monitor any impact on the MASCA project from the sanctions.
Right, and of course, it's not South Korea's own trade war or fight, but nevertheless, companies are incredibly nervous. You mentioned, rare earth minerals and Hana Oceans as well. And Professor Kim, well, of course, rare earth minerals elements, they're essential materials for semiconductors, which are, of course, Korea's most lucrative export item. And we also saw mentioned just now that 5 U.S. subsidiaries of South Korea's shipbuilder Hana Oceans is being sanctioned by Beijing. What kind of impact could the U.S.-China standoff continue to have on the Korean economy?
Right. It's kind of very convoluted situation right now. And as you mentioned, Korea kind of caught the crossfire. Like, as you said, crossfire, it's a fire between the two G2 countries, but Korea is kind of sort of in the middle, and that's why we caught the crossfire, as you just described. And two things. First one is the semiconductor business. That's probably one of the few sectors they are doing really well right now. Of course, thanks to super cycle and other features as well. But this rare earth element, as we showed right now, could be a factor to the development of the semiconductor industry right now. And that's what the U.S. is attacked by China right now. And that's one thing. And the other one, as the news came out last night, is about the shipbuilding side. Of course, the direct effect would not be as big because the shipyards, like in Philadelphia, the Philly shipyard is not exactly or directly importing the steels from China, but it has other effects as well. That's why Korean stock prices, especially the Hanwha and also other shipbuilding companies, it dropped by a few or even several percentage points. So they are impacted quite a bit, but it all depends on the negotiation between the two countries or the presidents. And then one of the good side is that we have the Gyeongju APEC summit at the end of the month. And that's even for the world, that's an opportunity for the world to move to the front or to move to the positive side. And especially for Korea, it's held in Korea, and that's where we have some leverage in terms of the negotiation itself. And that's, I hope, is a chance in terms of how to resolve this issue of being caught in the crossfire.
Right, Professor. So we're certainly hoping to see some kind of top-level executive action discussions take place to iron these matters out. But in the meantime, a lot of uncertainty lingers. So, Ji-hoon, how is all this uncertainty, this ongoing U.S.-China trade spat, really impacting Korea's foreign exchange and stock markets?
Yeah. The won currency has been weakening in the second half of this year, mostly due to uncertainty over South Korea's trade negotiations with the United States. Market participants are particularly worried about the impact of the 350 billion investment package, because if South Korea were to invest all of the money in cash, as the United States insists, they will have a huge downward pressure on the won currency. That's why last month the won weakened past the 1400 level against the dollar, which is a key psychological barrier for market participants as well as policymakers. And because of persisting weakness in the won, South Korea's foreign exchange authorities issued a rare verbal warning against market participants this week, saying they are closely monitoring herd-like behaviors in the foreign exchange market. However, the won is still trading weak despite the authorities' warning. And yesterday, it hit the weakest level in more than 5 months because the sanctions announced by China raised even more the worries about heightening tensions between China and the United States. When it comes to the stock market, it is faring better thanks to a rally in semiconductor stocks. Today, the Kospi closed at a record high. Because there is high optimism that the semiconductor industry is in an upcycle or a super cycle. The optimism is being fueled by a recent deal between OpenAI and South Korean chip makers, and as well as Samsung's upbeat earnings for the third quarter announced yesterday. So the impact on South Korea's financial markets has mostly been in the foreign exchange market, while the stock market has been performing a little better.
Right, that's good to hear. And well, in the meantime, Professor, so South Korea's 350 billion won worth of investments into the United States, this investment package, apparently Seoul's been maybe struggling to finalize it given the differences in view between Seoul and Washington over what exactly it would entail. Foreign Minister Cho-yeon said that Washington has tabled a new proposal. What exactly do you think has been put forward?
Of course, I do not know the exact answer of what has been proposed, of course, if I know that's something wrong, yeah. And I think, one feature that's touted a lot in Korea is about the currency option, like the Korea-US the option. And then that's if the swap is allowed, that's, I don't know whether that, to be frank, I don't know if it's good news or bad news, and then it should be a good news in terms of the fact that Korea is proposing it. But I don't think that's not the typical currency swap that has been done by the United States, by the Federal Reserve, because that has its own purpose. Of course, so many changes have been made dramatically since January 20th of this year in the United States, and there is no reason that for this the currency swap to be included one of those radical changes. But I don't think the independence of the central bank would allow that. That's what I am projecting, or at least hoping for. And so in terms of the number, the $350 billion is written down after $50 billion, the investment package by Japan. And when I asked my Japanese friends, even in Japan, exactly how the investment will be done has not been finalized. Of course, that has been tabled in terms of with more concreteness than with the Korean counterpart. However, in Japan, even that's not still finalized. And Korea, we are further away from finalization. And I'm sure that the Minister Koo, who should be in the plane right now to Washington, and then he will meet, and then I hope he will meet with the Scott Bessent in Washington, D.C. And then I hope they will propose something more concrete and then going towards the negotiation. But as with any negotiation, it's hard to tell what has been on the table because neither side would put it in the public domain, and they should not, for, of course, the obvious reasons. And then still, what has to come out? And from January 20th, or at least from the April 2nd, what's called so-called the Liberation Day, so many new things have been on the table, and it's still not cleared yet. And we have to still wait 3 more months for it to be exactly cleared and how $350 billion will compose of.
Right, certainly, as you mentioned, the Deputy Prime Minister for the Economy, Koo Yoon-chol, will be, he's probably on his way right now to DC to attend the G20 G20 meeting, but the hopes are high that he will meet with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. And Ji-hoon, you reported yesterday that Koo said he noted some notable progress, apparently, substantial progress in terms of, the difference in view between Seoul and Washington on what this $350 billion investment package is going to look like. So could you elaborate more and also tell us, what you expect to see from these talks?
Yeah, policymakers have been talking a lot about the progress in trade talks this week at parliamentary hearings. And it's not just Finance Minister Koo who is visiting the United States. It turned out today Policy Secretary Kim Yong-bum, as well as Industry Minister Kim Jong-kwan and Trade Minister Yeo Hwang-gu, they are all visiting the United States as one team for trade talks with follow-up trade negotiations with the United States. Policymakers have not yet they have not yet provided many details, but there were some noteworthy comments from parliamentary hearings this week. Minister Koo said, for instance, the U.S. was no longer insisting the $350 billion package no longer insisting that all of $350 billion of investment should be in cash, which Mr. Koo himself said is a huge progress. He said officials were negotiating at the working level, then how would the investment package be formed instead with loans and guarantees? And earlier on Monday, Minister Koo also said he believed the U.S. now understood South Korea's concerns to some extent. And Foreign Minister Jo-hyun also said there were some positive signals from the United States. According to a South Korean trade official, there was some response from the U.S. about South Korea's concerns about foreign exchange implications of the investment package, but there is a need for more negotiations with the U.S. about the structure of the investment package, as well as the text of the agreement. Experts say South Korea will likely want the investment package to have an extended timeline because the 3-year term is too short for South Korea, and as well as a safeguard for the foreign exchange market, such as a currency swap. And when it comes to foreign exchange swap, the United States is not so much positive about providing an unlimited swap line, but Minister Koo said there were various ways being discussed to offer some kind of safeguard, such as a conditional swap line. So much focus will be on the trip this week to see if South Korea will be able to narrow the gap with the United States regarding the investment package.
I see, Professor, your perspective on how these ongoing U.S. China tensions will affect Korea's ongoing tariff negotiations with Washington.
So it's really hard to tell to which side this U.S. China tension will move the situation of Korea. So I don't know whether the short video you showed of Deputy Prime Minister Ko Yoon-chol at Incheon Airport was today or not. And if it was today, then he looked more relaxed. So as the Mr. Lee has reported, maybe there might be some good news which may have made his face happier, right? So when I was working at the Federal Reserve, people in Wall Street tried to look at the face of the Federal Reserve chair. At that time, Bernanke was the chair, and that shows a lot. And he looked, I don't know, to me at least, he looked more relaxed, and that's the good news. And we talked about the Hana Ocean situation. There was the release last night about the Philly shipyard and also the other subsidiaries of the Hana Ocean. And if something happens on that front, then Korea is on the same side, in the same situation with the U.S. And that might make the trade negotiation easier on both sides because they have other rationale to cooperate. And in this kind of the trade tension or the country situation, it's hard to tell. And of course, that itself is a bad news for the shipbuilding companies, but maybe for the country as a whole or for the negotiation. And the Korea and the United States would be in the same situation. So that's why I'm saying it's hard to tell to which side the trade tension will affect the Korea-US trade talk.
Well, let's hope what Seoul officials have been hinting is true, that there's some cause for optimism. But in the meantime, though, there's ever more uncertainty that looms for Seoul. I mean, the European Union, they've decided to tighten the steel import quotas, which will, of course, affect South Korea as well. So how is this going to impact South Korea? What is the exact quota being discussed there?
Yeah, the European Union announced last week it will cut quotas for tariff-free steel imports by almost half, or 47%, and impose 50% tariffs on excess imports. The EU said the cut in quota volumes will bring imports to the level of the previous 2013 level, when global oversupply started to take place. The move is aimed at raising regional steel production to 80% of capacity compared with the current 67% due to rising imports and high U.S. tariffs of 50%. They will have a negative impact on South Korea's exports as well because the United Union is the third largest, a major market for South Korea. South Korea is the third largest exporter of steel products to the European Union, and its exports of $44.8 billion last year was even higher than $43.5 billion to the United States. And as you said, more importantly, the move comes as South Korea's steel manufacturers are already being affected by high 50% tariffs in the United States. South Korea's exports of steel products last month already fell for the 55th straight month. South Korea's trade ministry it said in a statement it was expressing concern to the European Union, and it will consult with the European Union to come up with a solution that is mutually favorable, as well as to be granted the maximum quota possible from the European Union.
Right, I see. And well, Professor, now Industry Minister Yang has met with EU officials trying to sort this out, proposing that existing trade volumes be maintained by the EU. But how much room is there really for negotiations? And what do you think are some cards that Korea could potentially have up its sleeve?
So in this kind of negotiation sphere or negotiation table, what they could give is the trade-off between short run and long run. And each country like Brussels, Seoul, Beijing, and Washington, they should discuss what could be done or should be done in the near term. And that's exactly the negotiations and also the tariff deal. So what Korea could provide in terms of what to the European Union and also to the United States is the strength of Korea in the medium to long term, and there should be the manufacturing side. Yeah, and Korea is one of the few countries that has manufacturing the value chain of most comprehensive sense, and with the European Union, the way to maintain this existing volume is to propose a long-term relationship and to emphasize the strength of Korean manufacturing, say in the semiconductor industry, as we mentioned a couple of times, and also it could be with the shipbuilding as Korea's negotiation with the United States. Of course, even when the Korean president visited the Philadelphia shipyard, that's a very good sign with the United States, but that caught the media attention around the world, and that could be one reason why last night China was attacking on that front. And that's unavoidable, and emphasizing its manufacturing ability of South Korea in terms of the shipbuilding and the semiconductor, and of course the car industry, emphasize that and then propose that as a long-term, credible relationship with any country, including the EU, would be a very fruitful way of negotiating with other countries or entities like the European Union.
Well, let's hope to see some real progress and hopefully a breakthrough happen in the near future. Well, this is where we're going to have to wrap up. Thank you very much, Jinill from Reuters, and thank you very much, Professor Kim Jinill from Korea University.
Thank you.
This concludes today's edition of Press Perspective. Thank you to our viewers for watching. Join us at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.